algebra class, you will encounter equations where you are asked to solve, and there's a variable and there's a fraction. Don't freak out, but you will have to get comfortable solving these types of equations. Here we have two, and one thing that students kind of do is they shut down when they see a variable and a fraction. That is, until they see how to do it and they get comfortable with it. One way that you can think about example 1 is saying, okay, I've got x divided by 4 equals 8. How do I undo dividing by 4? And one way that you can do this is say, all right, well, the opposite of dividing by 4 is to multiply by 4. So you can look at this equation and say, I'm going to multiply both sides of this equation by 4 divided by 1, which also happens to be the reciprocal of the coefficient of x. Now, it doesn't really look like a coefficient because it's written as a fraction, but this is actually 1/4 times x. So if I continue solving this, I've got my equivalent form of 1. I've got 1x. I'm not going to write the 1, though. 8 times 4 divided by 1 is 32. So I'm going to circle my answer. And remember, when it says solve, that means don't just solve it, but plug it back into the original equation and make sure that it works. So we're going to do that. I'm going to write check. And we've got 1/4 times 32 is equal to 8. And I'm going to write a little question mark. And so 1/4 of 32 is 8. We have 8 equals 8. This solution checks out. In example 2, what I've tried to do is combine two other scary things that can happen with equations and fractions. And what we have is we have a variable on the right-hand side, and we have a fraction that has a numerator that is not 1. A couple ways you can do this. One, you could rewrite this and just switch the sides of the equation. You could write it as -2/3 y equals 12. Or you could say, you know what, I'm comfortable with the variable being on the right-hand side. It doesn't change how I solve anything. And so let's just say, how do I undo multiplying y by -2/3? Well, I'm going to multiply by the multiplicative inverse, which is -3/2. So remember, the multiplicative inverse is that number times itself, or that number times the multiplicative inverse, that gives you 1. So we have -3 times -3 is 1, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and I think I said -3 times -3, I meant divided. And then we see that we just have 1y on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, we've got -3/2 times 12. And the way I like to do these is to say, okay, well, I can do the 12 divided by 2. That's 6. 6 times -3 is -18. Good idea right now would be to plug this back in. So I would write check. And I'd say 12 is equal to -2/3 times -18. Question mark. I see I have a negative times a negative, so I know I'm going to have a positive. And 18 divided by 3 is 6, times 2 is 12. This one checks out. So solving single-step equations with variables is not that scary now that you know the trick.